Hey Richard,
Hey man,
how you doing?
I'm doing well. How you
All
doing?
righty. Thanks for being on here.
Thanks for having me.
It was nice to catch up with you recently after like 20 years.
I mean, we've touched we've touched base here and there over the time, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think we ran into each other once or twice in those 20 years and then a few like online check-ins.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah. Well,
Like that's what's weird is I feel like there's so many people I'm connected to on Facebook now or whatever that I haven't seen for so long, but I just keep up with them
yeah.
because of Facebook. So
Yeah. It does have its purposes, which does keep you somewhat connected. And
yeah,
it's easy to get back in touch with people. That's what's cool.
yeah, for
In the
sure.
old days, you would have to look them up in the yellow pages or something. But anyways, tell us a little bit about yourself, your immediate family, and what you do currently, just to get started.
All right. My name is Richard Lam. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I do massage therapy and music. Those two things primarily like kind of what I do now. And I am married to my wife April. We've been married for 20 years, and we have two boys,
How old are you boys?
Asher and Ezra. They're Ezra's 7 and Asher's 9.
7 and 9. Okay. And and then what's your handle on Instagram?
It is Chinese Whiteman because I'm half Chinese,
Set you up there.
and a lot of people don't know that. So I'm actually my I would say my dominant racial makeup is actually Chinese.
And
Uh,
people don't even
it's
know you're
like
Chinese.
50% that, but yeah, just recently, the girl that cuts my hair, I just got back from Salt Lake City. That's where my Chinese family lives, and I was telling her about it and like telling her about Chinese stuff, and she was like, "Oh, you're Chinese? That's why your email's Chinese white man." But I'm like, yeah, it's not Chinese white man because I'm not Chinese.
Yeah, that's funny.
But I'm not Cuban either. So
Yeah, you look like you could pass as a few different things, but I do see the Chinese one.
my dad,
I remember you telling me that a long time ago.
yeah, my dad is like, he's not a very traditional looking Chinese person either. Like he's even like within his family, like he just has a kind of a different look. But he's like very dark, and he looks like, especially when he was younger, he had like a thick mustache. He looks like Colombian or something.
That's
So
cool.
it makes me extra ambiguous.
You're the mysterious man of mystery. So
Oh God.
so yeah, let's talk about first of all how we got to know each other. Do you
Yeah.
remember? Do you remember do you
I know it's
remember
from hip hop
meeting?
stuff.
Yeah. I remember I think the earliest memory I have of knowing you was like in that church building where they did UAU
Oh yeah.
called the
Where
Exchange.
with the open mic stuff.
Yeah. And you were like setting up your turntables and I was like, cool, man. And I like come over and start talking to you about that. So it's kind of what I remember. And then you were really nice. I
Yeah.
remember that. And that goes a long way with me because I like nice people more than mean people. So we totally connected on that level.
Yeah, like that's unusual. I like nice people, not mean people.
Yeah,
Um,
I love nice
that's
people.
funny. Well, pretty much that could be the story for like a lot of people I met through A to J, or not A to J. That was another thing. UAU. So for anybody who doesn't know, UAU is Urban Artists United. Was like a little. Uh, it was like just a way to call the like Christian hip hop community. I'd say primarily in Phoenix, although I think it went outside of Phoenix, just with people we were connected to through
Yeah,
like the Christian hip hop community in general. But
it was happening around 2000 or 99 or something like that, right? What
Yeah,
years would you say?
I think vocab probably got it going around that time, and I didn't become a Christian until 2000.
Oh wow. So it was after that probably that I met
And
you.
like actually getting turntables and becoming a Christian was like almost a synonymous. Not that they were related, but it just in that time frame, um, for me was like right around 2000.
Well,
So
let's start there then. What was happening? How did that happen?
how did I become a Christian?
And get turntables at the same time.
Yeah, well, I actually um I have always been much more of a rock guy. Uh, um, First of all, I started playing guitar. Well, grew up in a totally unchurched, unreligious home, and was cool because it wasn't like my parents didn't have a whole lot of ideas that they were trying to like force one way or the other.
Mhm.
Um, and I started I hate to say this, but I think I started getting into hip hop around the time I started smoking weed, which was like junior high-ish. So like into high school, I started getting like super into hip hop, but it was never my identity, you know. It was just
Mhm.
like it was a thing that I really enjoyed. And then near the end of high school, my sister, she started getting a group of friends. So we went to separate high schools. She was a couple years older than me. She went to North High School. Sorry if I'm sharing too many details. But this group of friends started bringing her to church, and I would hang out with them. Um, Actually, her and her boyfriend, like they were like a weed connection for me. So we were all like potheads who were kind of getting into the church. And
That's a
um,
cool story.
yeah, it was actually really cool because um, you know, I everybody was everybody like in the community that I was the Christian community that I was exposed to, I was like very obviously a pothead. That was like very much an identity thing for me actually. And nobody was like, you have to like stop smoking pot, you know. I just kind of figured that out. I kind of figured that out the hard way. So I don't know. We could maybe table that story if we could open it up. I don't know. But
Well, maybe we'll come back to that. But I want to keep
yeah,
I
we
want to
can
keep
go
going.
back to that.
How did that end up becoming like
So
becoming Christian, getting
so
turntables, and then I met you?
so yeah, like I started, I'd say like my junior year, I was like very, very into hip hop and like I said, primarily a lot of eclectic music, but um I started getting into like turntable-ists, like Mixmaster Mike, Hubert. Those guys were like North California. They called themselves the Scratch Pickles. There's like the X-Men in New York, the Beat Junkies in LA, like South California. So I was like really like interested in what these guys were doing, which is like using a turntable as an instrument.
Were you already
So
playing guitar yet?
yeah, I started playing guitar when I was 12.
Okay.
So I like, not to be like bragging or something, but I got like really good at guitar in the first like couple years that I was playing. Because one thing about me and about being a generalist, well, I guess this isn't so much being a generalist, but I will just grab onto like a hobby or a thing and just focus on it. And especially when you're 12, it's like I did nothing but play guitar for like a couple years.
Yeah.
And I really have, I mean, that was like my deep dive. And I've had periods where I took in strides, but I've never put down the guitar. Um, that's always kind of been my thing. But with the turntables, I just wanted to learn how to, because I'm watching, you know, like Hubert and stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know why. I'm just like, I have to do that. So when I graduated high school in 2000, I got turntables. I got money from my family and I got turntables. That same summer, I met Vocab Malone.
So you were like
So
18?
yeah, I was 18. I started working at UPS. Me and Vocab were in the same area when we started there. He started just I think a month before I did or something like that.
Oh, that's how you
And
guys
I
met
was
each
like a
other?
yeah, I was a baby Christian and he was in seminary or something. He was like not seminary, but he was in some kind of Bible school or something. He came out from Columbus and he was all about obviously but for anybody who doesn't know, he was all about evangelizing. And I'm like, oh yeah, I like hip hop. I got turntables and I'm a Christian too. And I mean, like he really, really discipled me. Like I credit him a lot for, really like helping sure I think like in a really short time. And I think really, helping me like get rooted and solidified in the faith.
Yeah.
Um, so it was probably pretty quick that we started doing shows and stuff together. And then over the next like 2 years, that was like all I did.
Yeah. And then
Um,
right after that is like when UAU was happening.
so yeah, I mean, that was pretty early in the UAU thing starting.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I was like very, very active until like in 2003, 2004. And that was like, it kind of just dissolved, right? I mean,
Yeah. I don't know. I moved away in '03, so I don't know what happened after that. But just to paint the picture for everyone, this was a kind of a formational time for you and I both, I'm sure, and all those guys who were
yeah,
there, guys and gals. But
yeah,
like we would show up at this church called the Exchange in Tempe. It was maybe like once a month, right? And there'd be
yeah.
like there,
It was before there was First Friday, before there was an art walk. The open mic for UAU was First Friday.
okay, yeah. So I'd be coming down from Scottsdale down to Tempe, 20 minutes, super stoked to go like be a part of some hip hop thing that I've been waiting for my whole life. Because I knew nobody in hip hop like growing up. Like I had
How
reached out
how
to
did you how did you being like a kid from Scottsdale get into hip hop?
um
I mean, at the time, I would guess that that's probably like pretty like out crowd stuff.
well by high school in high school there was like kids with Wu-Tang on the back of their truck. Literally, I'm realizing now that was like the year it came out. They already had Wu-Tang on the back of their truck, like huge sticker like this big. So that it
Just
was
like white Scottsdale kids.
oh yeah, it was like the biggest music. Like Dre came out when I was in freshman year, Snoop came out sophomore year. Like these hugest albums of all time like came out while we were in high school. So it was like kind of when hip hop was breaking through altogether also. And like the
Yeah.
Fugees were coming out. Busta Rhymes was making major bangers. Like crazy stuff was happening on the mainstream stuff.
Yeah,
And
I guess like I mean I can definitely acknowledge that that stuff was mainstream, but I don't even
yeah, it
I
was
mean
like all my
I
high
went to
school was
Central
listening to.
I went to Central High School. So that was like inner city Phoenix. I mean like that's a different world.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I mean there's obviously like white heads, but like I don't think a lot of white people were like really in the know about hip hop.
They
But
I
like
don't
in
I
my
don't know.
world,
Yeah, I don't know. I knew Scottsdale and like there was a lot of hip hop
I
around me.
could be
Like,
wrong. Sorry.
yeah. No, all my friends, my best friend growing up, he would do that CD thing where you get like you pay like a penny and you get like a bunch of CDs sent to you or there was some like
Oh yeah,
mail order thing
yeah,
and
like some
it was all hip
Columbia
hop.
or something like that,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah. And he would pick like 10 albums and they'd all get sent. And we would check out all these rappers like back then. It was all hip hop. Like literally that's all we listened to. And from a young age, me and him. And we were into Ghetto Boys and Cypress Hill and like all this crazy stuff for like who we were, these little kids in Scottsdale on our rollerblades. But that was all we listened to nonstop. And I remember the first tape I bought, we walked to I forgot what it was called now. It's gone. It was like Scottsdale and Cactus, or no, Tatum and Cactus. Um, Sam Goody. And
Oh
I
yeah.
bought Too Short, like Shorty the Pimp. That was my first tape I
Wow,
ever bought
dude.
with my own money.
When you were how old?
I was like in 8th grade, maybe. We walked
Dang.
there, so we weren't driving or anything.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's how into hip hop we were. I don't know. My story goes
Yeah. See,
back.
I was not into hip hop like that.
Yeah.
Like in 8th grade, I was like, I had like long hair and I was all about like Nirvana and Alice in Chains. And I was definitely listening to hip hop. Like my gateway was kind of like Beastie Boys. I don't
Yeah.
know how, well, I actually do know how. My friend Simon was like very just into all sorts of underground music and stuff. So like I started liking like Tricky, which is like,
I don't
I don't
know
even know
that.
if you know who that is. He's
Hmm.
he's a guy from Massive Attack.
I know that
So it's
name.
like it's Massive Attack is like UK trip hop. It's like kind of like Portishead vibe.
Yeah.
So that was like a gateway for me to get into hip hop.
Oh, that's cool. I like Portishead.
Yeah.
My wife and I were just reminiscing on that. She's like, I think they only had like 2 albums, and I was like, really? So, anyways, but the weird thing for me with hip hop, it was my parents. Actually, it was my friend of my family, this old Jewish couple. They were always into like cool stuff. They always were at the front of the trends, even though they were like 20 years older than my parents. And one day when I was 8 years old, she gave me a tape around Christmas time, and it just said Beat Street on it in writing. And it was actually the Beat Street soundtrack from the old like
Yeah.
80s
Yeah.
original hip hop movie. And from there on, I was 100% hip hop. Like that tape was
Wow.
shredded. Like I knew every word on that tape. And it was the sound of it was what I appealed to me the most. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just loved that rhythmic like talking. And I told my friends, I'm like, I like this stuff with all the talking before I even knew what it was called. Because I was like 8 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was obviously exposed to some stuff when I was younger, like Run DMC and stuff like that, like old Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you not like that? I don't know.
It was too much fun to not like it. But all my neighborhood boys, they all like only liked hair bands. They were all into 80s rock only. And they were
Yeah.
making fun of me liking rap. And I hated their hair bands. So that was like my position in the neighborhood was like the musical outcast. It
Yeah. That's
was
awesome.
funny. But yeah.
So
Back
so
to you.
you found a UAU, the UAU community, and
Yeah. And it was like during those years before that that I was also becoming a Christian, like in a more real way. And then I was finding some Christian hip hop groups, but some of them were pretty cheesy and some were pretty cool. Um,
yeah.
but like to have our own local thing happening was pretty insane. And just for the people listening that weren't there, I mean, there would be 100, sometimes 150 people there. It seemed like it might have been eight.
It was dope.
It
It
might have
was
been
really dope.
80 to 150. You know, it was pretty big for what it
Yeah.
was. It was pretty huge
Yeah.
for what it was. And then you have like
Yeah,
20
and there were like
acts.
we had like some people coming through too who were like it was very cool. Like it wasn't like we were trying to be super like cramming Jesus down people's throats. Like it was just like a hip hop community thing, you know?
Yeah.
Um like uh who like the cats from like De La Escuela, they're just like a secular local hip hop group, you know. Like they were really down with us. We'd go to all sorts of events with them, you know.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
yeah, um, yeah,
Yeah. Shout out to all the homies that were there, like the rep and Intergate. And I met Fornone there and Joey and Fornone. Who else do you remember? What other name
yeah.
dropping?
Do you remember Ruthless?
Yeah. And homeboy Chris Preeb with Proclaim was there.
Yeah, Chris. He would be a good guy to have on, I think, because he does a lot of
Yeah,
cool
I'd
stuff.
like to. Yeah, he does.
Um,
So we're coming for you, Chris.
yeah, Emmaus,
Emmaus was dope.
Cree, like yeah, it
Vocab.
it was it was rad.
Brian Kilgore was an incredible singer.
Yeah, dude. I
He's
so
still doing
Brian
it.
Kilgore, is he?
Yeah, I think
I hope so.
I just saw him online, like yeah, Instagram.
Like doing music stuff?
I can't remember if he was doing music, but I saw him.
Oh, okay.
I saw his
Oh,
name
yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
like, I know him.
Yeah, he got super into the art. He would be another guy that would be awesome to have on. He got really into his art.
That's
Um, that
cool.
was that was always kind of his main thing, but like, oh gosh, that guy was so talented.
Yeah, really
And I
talented.
I like latched onto him, like we were like really tight for a couple years doing a ton of shows together and stuff.
Oh yeah, Mindscape. He was one of the guys. I
Oh yeah.
made some friends there. That was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a really fun scene for both of us, and that's kind of where we got a lot of like synergy with other artists. It propelled me into like
Yeah.
doing more music for sure.
Yeah.
So then, so let's where do you want to go from there? You want to go into
So, sorry,
where
we
you,
just like that was just all UAU. Just I don't know if that's interesting for other people, but I for me that's awesome.
yeah, it may not be
Because I mean,
interesting to everyone, but it
yeah,
was
like
definitely fun.
I want to say I knew my wife from high school, and we hadn't seen each other for like a couple years. We reconnected in 2002. So that was like, I mean, I was like peaking with doing UAU and hip hop shows and all the time. And um, we, so we reconnected in like February 2002. We were married in December of 2002.
Oh wow.
And I was not even 21 yet.
Wow.
Um, so like I think I don't know. A lot of people started going separate ways. Like it wasn't. I still stayed as active as I could be um, for a good year or two after getting married. But I mean, I think that definitely like pulled me away, and I eventually by probably 2004, I wasn't really doing anything with hip hop anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and then
I think around that time, 03, 04 is when, well, 03 is when I left and moved to California, but I saw you right before that at Neighborhood Min, like playing some guitar, I think. I think you might have even been leading
yeah,
worship at the time. So I know you were
so
getting more into guitar back into guitar mostly.
yeah. So the way, like, this is just part of my story is like, I was primarily a guitar guy. Like I said, smoking weed was like sort of synonymous with that for me. And just like, I think like a lot of just otherworldly ideas in some ways were like attached to that. And I kind of ended up, when I became a Christian, I picked up the hip hop thing, started DJing, and it just was like, I felt like I was being used there, you know? And it was like, I never put the guitar down. Like I said, I started playing with Brian, Brian Kilgore, and do like, so I never stopped, but I felt like it was too much of like my identity, like in a worldly sense, where, yeah, I just had to lay it down. And I started playing guitar in church, but it was much more of like a servant role, it was much more, it wasn't as like as much of an artistic expression kind of a thing. It
Yeah.
was just like a
It
tool
typically
to
isn't.
well, music in church is typically not really, although yeah, we can talk about that more. But um I spent the next like, well, this whole time, like in this time frame that we're talking about, I was in school for recording.
Oh yeah.
So
I remember
I
that.
I got my associate degree at PC in audio production. And right after I went full time at UPS, so I just was like driving a truck full time and doing church stuff. And I did
Were
I
you wearing
did
the tan?
lives.
Were you wearing the tan shorts?
Yeah, I was like in the brown outfit and driving a brown truck and
Amen to that.
huffing packages. Like it's like real work,
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was at neighborhood for maybe until '04, and I was playing worship like every week there. Um, and I was also doing like live sound um at Modified Arts.
Oh,
You know
cool.
Modified?
Yeah. The
So
gallery
yeah,
and the
yeah,
Roosevelt,
back
like
then they
first
were like
Fridays scene.
primary, yeah, like early 2000s, they were like the only thing there.
Yeah.
There wasn't all this, like now it's exploded, and like every single building on that whole street for like a mile is like an art gallery, some eclectic like hipster thing. But
Well, for
Modified,
people that don't know Phoenix, like when we were in high school and early college, there was literally nothing to do downtown. Like it was
no,
like a ghost town at night after work.
yeah,
It was like a business town basically.
yeah,
And then early
man,
2000s they started that first Fridays. And in the beginning, maybe like the first 10 years, it got really cool and like all these little bungalows were turned into galleries. But now Jill and I just went back last year and now it's like commercial real estate got in there and made all these bars and everything. Now it's like this incredibly huge business center for like nightlife.
yeah,
It's the opposite of what it was like 20 years ago. And
yeah,
it passed cool and went into like hyper commercial now.
yeah.
It's still
In my
cool.
opinion, like like probably in the time period that you were gone when it really grew, it grew to a point before it got super commercially where like it was just, I don't know, like it just, the sense of community started feeling like less deep,
Mhm.
and it just became more of a circus, you know?
Yeah.
So there was like it fell, in my opinion, it fell way off before that. And then but it's like it's bustling now, you know?
It's just a
So
totally different
that's,
animal. That's the thing. It's not
yeah.
bad. It's not bad. It's just not what it was. It's not the little art
Yeah.
galleries everywhere. Now it's like
In my
bars
opinion,
everywhere.
it's not quite as much of an authentic, like creative community. I don't know. Maybe I'm just an old fart, but
Yeah, we're both old farts. So no, but
um,
I'm sure there's pockets in there that are still pretty rad, you know, but it's like the whole macro view of it is pretty, you know, it's like might as well be the Scottsdale quarter now. It's just like tons of restaurants and bars, which is
yeah. I mean,
it's cool, but it's
it's
not
still
what it
the
was.
kind of eclectic hipster kind of area, right? But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it's not the Scottsdale quarter. I don't mean that, but I just mean so built up.
no, it is
Hmm.
more that way for sure. But funny story, like you mentioned, you know, it being a ghost town, and you know, when Modified like literally was like the only thing there. If it wasn't like a big arena where you'd go see like, you know, the the like the Suns, or you know,
Yeah.
a huge arena rock show or something, like it was not as safe. And one time, I'll tell a story. I'll just preface this that like I've been clean for 20 years, like squeaky clean, but I had a history of drug use, and I don't condone any use of drugs. But one time I took acid and saw, I went to go see one of my favorite bands who ended up getting like a flat tire, so they didn't show up, and like something else was happening. I was just like super bummed out, and I'm starting to like stuff is starting to happen, and I'm like, I'm just freaked out. And some homeless guy started talking to us, and I was like, I couldn't even process what was going on, but my friends were kind of like dealing with this guy, and they ended up like, some for some reason, like they ended up like around the corner, and I'm just kind of like uncomfortable standing there, and I go around the corner, and when you're doing that, your sense of time is all whacked out. So I they were gone, and they had walked around the building. They were coming around the other side. So I was behind the building, and like this all probably happened so fast, but my sense of time was so messed up that I was just like, oh, my friends are gone. So I just started walking home, which was like, I mean,
That's
I was in
scary.
Phoenix, but I was my house was like all the way on like north of Camelback.
Yeah, that's far.
So like, I mean, I got home fine. I just walked home, and I just went,
Oh
I think I
gosh.
laid in my bed, but I didn't even go
That's
to sleep
scary, man.
because I sat, my parents were already asleep. I sat, and like my rug was just crawling colors, and I was just like, what a waste. This sucks. And I just like laid in my bed, and my friend came over early in the morning, and he was like, I think he was looking for me for hours.
Yeah.
Like, and he was like, oh my God, like what? I just came outside and he's like, what the hell happened to you? Like, and there's like no sense. Obviously, he can't call my house because he can't like out me to my parents, you know. But I was fine. It was fine. But they were very freaked out because you don't want to be like a shrimpy little like 15-year-old long-haired kid
Yeah.
walking around downtown,
Yeah. That is scary.
especially then. Anyway,
So yeah, that's a good story. That is scary. I hope your parents don't hear this. Or do they know that story?
no, they can hear it. It's fine. Like I've hashed all this out with them.
Yeah.
That specific story might be like not something we want to hear, but I mean,
Well,
it's
no,
fine.
I mean like how much it would give a parent a heart attack if they hadn't heard it.
Yeah, no, I like, so when I became a Christian, like, and I had a period where, you know, I sort of realized, I don't know, I've, I don't want to come off as judgmental too, because like I said before, it's like nobody told me like, oh, hey, you can't do drugs, and I don't want to necessarily tell people like, hey, you can't. Really, my thing was smoking weed, so it's like I don't want to necessarily be like, oh, you can't smoke weed ever. It's not allowed. Otherwise, you're not a Christian. But I know for sure for me, it was like I was intertwined with it. It was like it was a master,
Mhm.
and
Like it was
it
a identity.
yeah, like it was a master. It was like I wake up and be like, where's my weed? You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it's like I think it can be good for people. Like I think there's medicinal benefits to it and stuff. But when something controls you like that, I believe like, you know, you have to submit that to God.
Yeah.
So it took me a while of like it wasn't even like so much cognizant, like it was internal, like I was getting depressed, and it's like I knew inside of me, I need to let this go. You know, this has a hold of me in a way to where like I really need to drop it. And I it was starting to become more in the front of my mind as I struggle with this, and I'm like, oh, okay, if I can only do it like on the weekends, then it's okay, you know. If I can only do it once a month or whatever, and I couldn't do that. It was like I was used to smoking weed all the time. So
Yeah.
for me, I had to totally stop. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's tangent.
And then so then you and your wife got married in which year? 2003, you said?
So we got married, yeah, 2002, December 7th, and
Oh, so you just hit 20 years?
yeah, we just passed 20 years.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
We're just behind you. We're like 1 or 2 years behind you, which is
yeah.
cool.
I know.
So
I
then
was just
so tell me about your marriage and then your kids, like from there on, like what was happening, and then I mean wherever it makes sense, like intertwine the spiritual journey too. But like you and
yeah,
your wife, were you guys, super Christian and praying your way through your engagement and getting married and all that?
yes. Yeah, we were. We managed to stay virgins, which for me was like she assumed that I wasn't a virgin when we got together. And in her mind, she like had to make peace with that, you know. She's like, okay, it's okay. And until I was like, oh yeah, I'm a virgin. And she was like shocked.
Yeah.
So because I wasn't a Christian, you know,
Uh-huh.
and we did
Was that a
manage
conscious decision for
to
you
maintain
when
that.
you weren't a Christian?
Yeah, like I had only had like one one serious girlfriend for like 6 months when I was 16, and a couple other opportunities to for that to happen. And
Yeah.
I was not ready, man. Like I was scared. Like it just felt too heavy for me, even though like I wanted to, and I'm a young boy, you know. And I kind of feel like it's a miracle too. But
Well, it's
yeah,
kind of cool.
somehow
Kind of
I,
cool that you had some kind of view of it, that it was special. It wasn't just to be thrown away. There's something about it that made you fear it, or
yeah, it
have
was
a
definitely like,
some kind of
it was
respect.
definitely, I was scared. I was definitely like, again, like I wasn't as like front of my mind cognizant of it, but I knew that I wasn't like emotionally ready for that, you know? And
Yeah,
so yeah,
that's
I'm proud
cool.
to say that we maintained that through our engagement, which was only 6 months. Wayne Danley, you know Wayne from Neighborhood,
I
Kit
don't know him,
Danley's
but I
husband.
know Kit. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kit's husband, they're leaders of Neighborhood Ministries, for anybody who doesn't know. We told, like right after we got engaged, we told Billy Thrall, the pastor, and we told Wayne like the next day or the next Sunday. And Wayne, Billy was like a little bit like, oh, okay, like let's do some counseling, you know? And Wayne was like, do not be engaged for more than 6 months. Like if you're gonna get married, like get married now, you know? And we took that to heart, you know? And I mean, some of that is because of like the physical aspect of it and temptation, and you want to like set yourself up on the right foot, on the right foundation, you know? And like, although I will say that we did cross lines, I think actually other lines that we felt like we had to kind of deal with in certain ways. Like we sort of regretted, you know, we both wished, I think, that we were like would have kept it a little more pure, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that. I don't think I'm ready to pack. I don't think the stories are like clear enough in my mind to really unpack that right now. But yeah, we got
So
married.
then, so then
We
you guys you lived in Phoenix, and then how many years later
we
that
stayed in Phoenix.
you ended up into some like Christian community, right?
Yeah, so we I think neighborhood, we are like, I love neighborhood. I still, you know, like affirm them and everything, but they're like very much on the left side of things. And I didn't know at the time, like I didn't have words for this. I didn't understand that I was conservative, but there were like just a lot of things along those lines that as after we were married for the next like year or so, we were like just not feeling like we lined up with a lot of stuff in neighborhood. So we finally made the decision to leave neighborhood center without anywhere to go, and kind of bounced around a little bit until we well, I don't know, there's like a lot of stories to kind of tell in there, but we ended up uh meeting or going to a church called Poima, who was headed up by a guy named John Mitchell. He was the pastor there,
And
and that was
how many years after your marriage that you're going like that?
uh
Are you
man,
still
I
at
don't know the
neighborhood a
dates.
couple years, or what do you think?
I want to say like we were at neighborhood for like a year after we got married.
Okay. And then how long
So
after
yeah.
that when you had kids? Like a
Um
long time, right?
so yeah, our oldest is going to be 10 in May.
Okay, so 10 years of marriage
So we
before
held up for
kids.
10 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a long time.
So part of that was intentional. Like when we got married, we kind of set out to be like, let's purposely like let's not have kids right away so we can just enjoy like being young and kind of develop our relationship. Um and I just, again, I emotionally like didn't quite feel ready until I was about 27. We like she started school for nursing, so that kind of prolonged, I think, our us like wanting to finally have kids.
And
um
it's just smart too. I mean, I don't know if you guys meant to be smart, but that's some smart stuff, because my wife and I have
you know
noticed like a lot of people get
it, I,
married really young, and then they have if they have kids right away, they literally have no time to like build their just what their marriage is on its own. And you guys had
Right.
that for 10 years, which is really, and you didn't have kids while you're trying to do nursing school and stuff, which is really
Yeah.
good.
I I have mixed feelings about that, you know.
Yeah.
That was the idea. Like we literally set out to do exactly what you just said. But like I think like I kind of look back and I'm like I'm a little bit it's like I feel almost a little bit like ashamed, honestly. I feel like I was kind of selfish. Um I think that it was definitely and I don't regret anything. I think that there's probably truth to like, oh, you should establish like who you are, you know, be, before you just throw kids in the mix. Like that makes sense in my mind. But I mean, like, I, in my experience, like it's, I mean, who knows? You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
kind of felt like it just threw a wrench into this thing that was like kind of working and pretty easy. That like was like, oh my gosh, we need to like refigure everything, you know?
Yeah.
So in a way, like I'm like, oh man, maybe it's good to just throw them in the mix right away. And you know,
Yeah.
um, I I would I would love to have more kids, but April had complications with pregnancy, so like it was too freaky. So again, that's like that's a I I I I don't feel shame for that, I don't think, but it's like we're playing it safe, you know?
Yeah. Did she want
So
to have more kids than that too?
she actually she's actually more like two is good for me.
Yeah.
um although I think if we could, we kind of jokingly say that if we could be guaranteed a girl, we would go for it. But I've had the vasectomy, so like that's already not gonna happen for us.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah, that ship has sailed.
So
Um,
so then tell me about let's move on to your kids. So Asher is your first one?
yes, yeah, Asher, he was born in 2013.
Okay.
So we had our 10-year anniversary while she was a couple months pregnant,
Okay.
and had a big party, and that was really awesome. And Billy, the pastor from neighborhood who married us, like came, and we had like a whole little extra service. And um yeah, Asher was born, and like areas of my heart just opened up that I didn't know were there, you know. It was like as soon as I saw him, and really like as soon as I heard him, because he was like like his scream was loud coming out.
Hmm.
Like yeah, as soon as I heard him, I just was like, ah, like I just lost it, you know.
Yeah.
And
This is
it
my
was like,
guy and he needs me and I'm the only dad he's got. It's just crazy.
yeah, I've heard some people say, you know, like they didn't feel it right away. Some people are like, I was like the guy who like felt it right away. Like the way that I explain it is like the typical woman, girl, like dreams of having their baby, you know, as soon as they can talk and walk, right? Like isn't that just like a typical girl thing that you just like,
Like dolls
and
and
then
babies.
yeah, and then like you're carrying it for 9 months. It's like so real for you know, as the mom. And in hindsight, like for me, it was almost like something that I was aware of, but emotionally like not really aware. And that might be a little bit unique to me because I'm just like that, compartmentalized. But um it was just like once he was there and I could see him and hear him, it was like I got a lifetime of all of that, like, you know, all of that like desire just like hit me all at once, you know?
No, it's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a cool
Um,
experience to be able to feel it like that. Because sometimes I wouldn't say just men, but I think men in particular can be a little more emotionally numb to things and wishing they could feel more, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So like to get that experience is like kind of what you want. You got your money's worth. It's like you got to
Yeah,
fully experience it.
it was awesome. And then we we were my recollection of like the first few months is like very different from hers because we tried to like be like I'll be the one like you can pump and I'll like get up and feed him, like we kind of tried to do that, but like I mean I think this is a typical man woman dynamic, like women are just like whatever physiologically like more attuned to their baby and their needs, and it cries and she's up and she's doing it and she's like shaking me to wake me up, you know. So like the truth is you know, it's for us it was a lot harder for her, whereas for me I had like saved up all this vacation. I planned it out so I could like use all my vacation and then start FMLA, and I like we saved up money so I took 4 full months off.
Oh wow.
And 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 that like that was just an awesome time because I mean yeah it's you don't know what you're doing, and especially when it's your first kid, right? It's like you're tending to it constantly, but it's like what else would I want to do, you know?
Yeah.
And really like you feed it, you just like, you know, skin to skin, you just lay with the kid, you know, and you feed him and you change the diaper and like and he's sleeping like 75% of the time, you know. So we're
Yeah.
just like in my mind I'm like we're just like enjoying like coffees and like read a little book or something. And um so leading up to this, like going back to the guitar thing, like I had sort of, in a sense of like the artistic creative side of that, I had put down the guitar in a sense because in a I don't want to say like I felt called to or something, but like I just it was just necessary, and I was like still being used musically. I feel like by God to do other stuff with like my talents or whatever. But really, like part of that started coming back again with I had mentioned Poima. So we had started going to that church. This was several years after we had left neighborhood. And Brian Whitman is the worship pastor, or was the worship pastor at Poima. And it started to like worship started to feel like a creative expression thing. Like I always connected and like from the first time I went to church, I always connected with the music of it. Like the more a song could like make me cry, like the better. And I was like very receptive to that. Like I love going to worship and just crying, you know. Um, but like I didn't feel like I could like artistically be me, if that made sense. But Brian Whitman, I felt like really gave me the okay to do that, and it was the right timing for me, you know.
Mhm.
So
That's cool.
yeah, some other
So
things
you're able to
happened.
artistically step into it more in a form of
Yeah,
worship, but also art at the
yeah,
same time.
exactly. So it worship, like part of it was like I wasn't doing as much music stuff outside of church really. By that time it was like I'm just going to do worship because like I want to do whatever I can do to like play guitar, but then I'm working, you know, ridiculous hours driving a truck. And so I have to mention Ascend the Hill, um who spending time with those guys, like they're from
It's a band.
Florida.
A band.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They came out, we had a mutual friend who was touring with them, and they like he was from here but lived in Nashville, ended up playing with the band, and just getting to spend just a week with those guys, like all of this stuff that I was like start like kind of developing on my own, they gave me more language for it musically, and just having a strong connection with them really helped me like develop as the guitar player. So that was like a good stride thing. So it was still a little bit compartmentalized because it was just like I'm just a UPS driver, and I play guitar and in church. But I still didn't quite feel like I was really like starting to unlock some of the potential that like God-given potential for that. But I will say that it felt like for the first time in like 10 years that I like was kind of given that back, it was like I had to put it down. I had to like shed the worldly identity that was associated with that for me. And then I was given back the guitar. And
Hmm.
when like during that 4 months when I was off, like I was one day, actually, this literally happened in a moment. I was prepping for worship and just kind of making like washy ambient sound, just kind of like, okay, like what can I do to tie these songs together, blah blah blah. And the baby was, I think he was just sleeping, and he was in the living room. I was in here in my office, and April's sitting in the living room reading, and she's like, hey, like I think he really likes that. So I was like, oh, actually, she was like, you should record that for him. So from then on, it was probably like I'd had a couple months, a few months maybe, where I spent a good amount of time just recording stuff with the idea of like recording it for him. And that was like the first, like time that I had done anything like that wasn't just like, oh, I'm scratching for this person, I'm playing guitar for that person. It was the first time that I'd like put my name on something. you know
Yeah.
um and I definitely owe a lot to Ascend the Hill and to Brian, the worship pastor at Poima, for helping me like kind of develop that and find my own voice.
Yeah.
And it was, I'd say more than anything, like, I mean, those experiences were necessary, and like techniques and tones and like just learning your instrument. But it was, I'd say, the inspiration from having a child, that sparked, like a new thing for me. um
Yeah. It's beautiful. And that in you have recordings, right? Are those called Asher's lullabies?
yeah, I first put that out as lullabies to Asher.
Are they still
And
out? Are they still out? Are they on the internet somewhere?
I actually I made, so when Ezra was born a couple years later, I made one for him, and it was the second thing that I had like done of my own. And I dropped the For Asher thing, and it just became lullabies. And then I put out another couple things, and after the fact, I pulled their records from anything, so you might be able to find them somewhere. Um, I know they were on Bandcamp, so like if you bought them at the time, like they're still definitely in people's collections. Um, but the original ones, I I, I don't think are anymore. I still have them though.
Okay. And then so far we haven't even gotten into Asher having autism. So
Yeah, so
that's a
Ezra
story of your
Ezra was
family.
born. Yeah,
How early
Yeah,
on did you
yeah,
start
Ezra's
to
born,
notice something?
and it was right around the time that Ezra was born. Asher would have been two, like 2 and a few months, and it was right around that time that we noticed that he was doing a lot of what they call parallel play. Um, so
Which
like
is
his
what?
social it's it's like, how do you describe this? April's so much more knowledgeable and better at this stuff than I am, but it's like if you take him to the playground, it's like he'll play like next to a kid, but he won't like look at the kid, you know,
Okay, yeah.
and like interact with him like in a normal kind of way. Um, that I probably shouldn't say a normal way, but
Yeah.
uh, like yeah, and just other things that again she really like led the charge with because she's a nurse and she's just like keen. Um, but it like he would color coordinate, like if he played with Matchbox cars, he would like RG Biv the Matchbox cars. Like that's, he wouldn't like crash them into each other. He would color coordinate them,
Hmm.
you know.
So you just
And
started
then others,
noticing some things that were different.
yeah, yeah, some things that were like kind of the typical autism behaviors, and got him evaluated through SARC, and he was uh, diagnosed by the time he was like 3 with autism, and we started him in a school called C,
Hmm.
which unfortunately is not as like at the time it was sort of, it was really cool. They were like, they specialized in children on the spectrum,
Hmm.
but it wasn't like we only take children on the spectrum. It was like a mixed uh population, I think they call it something like that. Which I think is a really good environment because then they get some of the help that they need, get some of the therapy that they need, but then you know they're not only interacting with children who are on the spectrum, so they can have, you know, normal behavior
Yeah.
modeled to them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, he was in Seek, and then probably for a year, and then I think when he was 4, he started. We got him into the developmental preschool, just like here in Creighton, um, Phoenix Public. The developmental preschool, like the Phoenix Public School, is not great, but the developmental preschool is fantastic. And honestly, like I give them so much credit, like really those two things, like a ton of credit for really helping him. I think it would be way more affected by autism if it wasn't for having those services and getting them early, you know.
Yeah. That's really good. What now he's how old? 8 or 9?
He's almost 10. He'll be 10 in
Okay.
like 2 months.
So what's been the trajectory for him, like from then, from like 4 or 5 to like 10, as far as how it affects him socially? Is he able to, has he developed in a lot of ways, or is it more
Yeah.
severe or more light in your eyes now, the way it
Yeah,
affects
no,
his life?
he's what's considered high functioning.
Hmm.
And I mean, right now, I don't think it affects his life much at all, actually.
That's cool.
And again, like I really credit like getting
The
like therapies and
early
stuff for him
support.
early on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm certain that he would be more affected had he not had early intervention. It was like it was tough when he was 3, 4, like it was really hard.
Was it hard on your
Um,
marriage too?
yeah, yeah. And I don't know, like I guess I don't really have any other experience. I don't know. I assume that just having kids in general is hard.
Yeah.
Um, and like that's not to say like my outlook on it is like super, super positive. Like it's not like
Yeah.
uh that's not
Well, you guys had a unique you
like a
guys had a
warning
unique
against having kids.
situation. You guys had a unique situation of 10 years of marriage before that too. So that's really good. I mean, that really gave you guys a foundation of communication and everything so that you could navigate
Yeah,
difficult things. Because honestly, my two older sons are, very compliant, very as normal as far as behavior as I could imagine. And then our third child, he's not diagnosed with autism or anything, but he's very high sensory. Like he feels things extreme. He's very defiant and he has all these different behaviors that we're not used to. And it's definitely been way harder on our marriage than the other two
yeah,
kids.
yeah,
So we noticed the difference between kids, like with a lot more, special, they are special needs. I have to actually adjust how I'm parenting for his needs a lot. And it has affected
yeah.
our marriage a lot. Like we've had a lot of arguments about it over the years of how to deal with this behaviors. So we're just now actually
Like in what way
um like
or
like
example?
every little thing you do through the day getting ready for school is a challenge, like disobedience and refusing to put on clothes that he needs to put on for the day. His is clothes mainly. That's the main thing he's
Uh,
struggles with. So we just started seeing an occupational therapist, and we're excited about that. It
no,
sounds like they totally know what we're dealing with. They fully understand like this little package of behaviors, and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. I'm so
yeah,
glad they're familiar with this set of things that we can now talk to them about. Like, how do we make him feel? You know, how do we make him regulate himself? Like, how do we help him regulate himself through these crazy big emotions? That he's feeling.
yeah,
So it's been it's been cool. But yeah, so that was your first experience with a child.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And he like he's I'd say what as far as like what we know now, because it's kind of easy years right now, he's 10. Like the hardest thing now that is he's most affected by is his food palate.
mhm,
Like he's very, very like only will accept certain things,
mhm,
and so there is like a concern about nutrition and stuff like that, and
yeah,
just flexibility. It's like it's a big deal. Like what are we gonna have for dinner tonight?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I think yeah, it probably is. It's just a norm for me, so I guess I don't think about it.
yeah.
um,
You're a pro now.
I I I I'm a very adaptable person, you know.
Yeah. So then, how is your second son, Ezra? Like, how is that him being added to the family, and then dynamics with Asher and stuff, and your marriage?
Yeah. Um, it's it's somewhat been challenging because of Asher's needs,
Hmm.
and like I think this probably is applicable to like second children in general, where it's like, especially for me, I don't know if you can had this experience or if you can imagine, like, I mean, it's all about Asher for 2 years, you know? So I had a little bit of the experience of like feeling a little bit guilty, that I didn't have as much of that mountaintop experience with Ezra, you know,
Hmm.
because your attention's divided now,
Yeah.
and Asher was like so, especially at that time, like so he's like almost like a perfect kid now. Like he in so many ways he's like very accommodating and stuff, even though he's has these certain things that we have to really accommodate for him. he's very gracious, and one really cool thing about Asher, just his personality, is he he's a very accepting person. And like, trying to think if this sounds bad, but like, I'll just say it, like, because he's very high functioning, like, most people don't know that he has autism, you know so it's
Mhm.
not like, I don't think he's perceived as like, oh, that's the weird kid.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if it's some of the things that he's learned, or I think maybe both, maybe just his personality, maybe a little nurture, and also like, but he's a person who's gonna like help somebody. Fit in. He's a person who's gonna be like, um kind of friends with the weird kid. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that about him. But it's challenging with his brother, because like, it it's getting much better. His brother's 7 now, but at first it was like the opposite of that. It was almost like, as when he's like 3, he's kind of like, this baby out of here. He's like he's like cramping my style. Is kind of how it felt.
Yeah.
So, that was challenging. And I think Ezra's felt that. Um, and I think we've learned how, like, I think we've learned how to like deal with that, and how to like get him the attention he needs to.
Yeah.
And everything feels like a lot more like kind of stable and normal now, but it was tough.
Yeah.
Um, Ezra, he actually has been diagnosed with ADHD.
Mhm.
So he's like very much that. Like, so that's like the challenges with him, is like, Asher is just so good in school. Like, it's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
he really enjoys school. His teachers, like, he's like, every year he's like every teacher's favorite student. And Ezra is just like, he's like too smart for school. He's
And
like,
struggling to sit still.
yeah, yeah, he's like, this is boring, this is stupid, all these people are stupid. And that's what we're dealing with him.
Yeah.
Although that's starting to get a little better.
Yeah.
um so I'm had mentioned we just went to Salt Lake and came back, so this was like the first week back, and dropping off Asher was like a piece of cake. And it wasn't bad with Ezra, but it was actually really good. Pulling up to his school, I was like, oh, I was just thinking to myself, this has been pretty easy. And as soon as we stopped the car in the line, he's like, this is going to be the worst day ever. And it wasn't. It usually isn't. I think he's catching up with that. He's starting to like learn that, hey, I pick you up, and you're having a lot of fun at school, and you're raving about your friend Lincoln and Ben or whatever. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So I feel like your family is a pretty awesome story, like so far, what I've heard and everything. And wanted to kind of transition into like faith and what's kind of been your trajectory. You weren't a Christian, you became a Christian around those days that you described, and then like what's gone on like the last few years, or some of the big sweeps in the middle there.
Yeah. um wow, so I had mentioned Poima,
Yeah.
and it was, I mean, time is rough, and we're talking about a lot of years, but it was like we were kind of floating around for like the first 5 years, like, where do we belong? And found Poima, at the same time, that was synonymous with getting involved in something called A to J, which is an abbreviation for Apprenticeship to Jesus. And it like, I'm gonna skip that. It's like, it's an awesome story, but I'll just briefly mention that is like living in community, sharing the things you have. So we're synonymously doing Apprenticeship to Jesus and Poima with John Mitchell and Brian Whitman, the pastor and worship pastor. Awesome people, really, really life-giving for us. And unfortunately, John, after maybe 4 or 5 years of Poima, not even, probably, I want to say it was about 3, 4 years maybe, John his family was suffering. Like, he was giving so much to the church that he had to be like, I need to like save my family.
Yeah.
And they went back home, which was Ohio or Idaho for them. And he did his best to kind of salvage what they started. But the truth is it was not developed enough for it to really be salvaged. That church became New City,
Oh, really?
which has become a pretty big church. And I'm just gonna be blunt, man. Like that, like I don't know. I don't want to be too negative because I will say this. I will affirm them as being brothers and sisters, but like it was a hard transition. Um, like for us, and we hung on for dear life. And the truth is like what was going at Poima was really deep and really beautiful and was very authentic community. And what it became as New City was less about authenticity and more about doing the right thing to be the cool church, and it grew to be like big. um but like all the main people like left, you know.
Yeah.
And we were like some of the last like core Poima people, like holding on for dear life. And part of maybe like what may have kept us there actually, and this is like, you know, I I can maybe put them in a little bit of it, is it like when they moved buildings, Asher hated it. It was like, it was weird because it became, I don't know if he was picking up on something from us. I do think that some of it was a sensory thing because it was a much bigger building and you walked into this like super echoey lobby. It was like all glass and concrete. And I think it was really overly stimulating for him. So anyway, long story short, like we had to leave. And we've been bouncing, like we're not even bouncing around anymore. Like I
So when was that then? Do you
definitely
think?
tried to um
Like how many years you've been bouncing around? I mean,
so well, we're done bouncing around. We're just like, we don't go to church, you know.
mhm.
um but so Asher was like 1, so that was 8 years ago.
Oh wow.
And yeah, we did bounce around for a couple years. We ended up finding finding a comfortable place at a church called Arcadia City Church, which um we still like. uh, I think we would still be going there if it wasn't for COVID, to be honest. Um,
Yeah.
it was like we were there for about 3 years, and it was comfortable. It was like nice. It was a lot of people in our demographic, and it was easy to go. You know, part of that for me, and part of my story with the whole like church thing is uh actually before Asher was born, I started doing like kind of like this church gigging thing. So
Like as a
it
guitarist?
I yeah, yeah. And so it was like supplemental income, and I'm we're skipping over this. I'm sorry there's so much, but like um so when he was when he was born, I had this like mountaintop experience. I was off for 4 months, right? I made this little record for him, and I went back to UPS, and I was like, my spirit was just crushed, and I like hardly ever saw him. And about after like 6 months, April came to me and was like, dude, I need to go back to work. Like, I'm losing my mind. And I was like, well, I would like to work less because I'm losing my mind. So we were all like
Yeah.
kind of wanting the same thing. It's just like wanting balance. I was like overworked. I was already didn't want to be there. But once I had Asher, it was like I was really depressed because I'm like, now I'm going to be the dad who's like not around, you know? So
Oh
long
yeah,
story short,
we did miss that part.
yeah, yeah. Long story short, man, I'm because this is like way too, she, this ridiculously awesome miracle job. There's a very long story that goes to it, but long story short, she started doing medical aesthetics as a nurse, which like had us like a dual income home for the really well, we were briefly before Asher was born because she was in nursing school for like a very long time. We had two incomes for like 9 months, and then she stayed home with Asher, right? um
Mm.
so it was, you know, what
Then
like
and then what you're getting
with
at
the
is
exception
you
of that brief time is like we had two incomes, and it was kind of like, oh, it's real for me to actually leave UPS. It was like definitely a sacrifice, but that's when I decided to go to school for massage therapy. And so it was like a year. I did the part-time year program. So like my job for that year was doing like playing guitar in church. And yeah, like it was good. Like it wasn't like it wasn't a terrible experience by any means. Like, but I kind of just got burnt out with like big production, like rock and roll worship. Like I went into it kind of loving that, and I have a I have a hard time with it now because like when it's I'm just super sensitive to like when it's authentic. And sometimes it could be like super like professional and sound just like the CD, and in my opinion be so dead, you know.
yeah.
And and sometimes it can have like the top notch, musicians and everything, and be great too. And actually I had that experience with Gateway Church, which is where I really like ended up primarily. um and I actually kind of pushed for that to be our church, but April just, I think rightly so, was just not really feeling it. One, it's really far from us. Two, it's like North Scottsdale, it's just like outside of the band, like I mean, there was definitely nice people and people I love, but it like I feel like I'm such like a weird outcast person that like I don't fit in anywhere, you know? And
Yeah.
I definitely like didn't feel like I feel like I love those people and I can affirm them as brothers and sisters in Christ, but it just didn't feel like our peeps, you know?
Yeah.
And so once once I started well, in general, I just got burnt out with like really the production church, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, especially I think for a musician, like if you're gonna get paid, like that's where you're gonna get paid doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And like I just couldn't do it
Your,
anymore.
your side hustle is pulling you into the ones that care about production.
Say that again?
Your side hustle was pulling you into those churches that care about all about production because they're going to pay a
Yes.
guitarist to come play.
Yes.
So in
Yes.
and of itself, it's slightly inauthentic because it's not their own people. They're hiring out, you know?
Right. Which is like a big problem and like critique I have of modern church, you know?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what happened with
It's
the
been going
deployment of
on.
new city.
It's been going on for a long time, that stuff.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
never sat that right with me either.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we could vibe on that a lot. I have my I mean, I'm from Scottsdale Bible, so that's massive production, like 6,000 people. And the biggest value is excellence. So
Yeah.
that really set the stage for me to like to not want that later. I'd rather just be in the backyard with some people and like pray and eat food and talk about our lives and God, you know. That became like what I want rather than or what I need and what I believe in more than a massive production. You know, the church became a massive production. I'm not sure when
Yeah.
or how, but it definitely did. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what people perceive as church, and it's really not. The people themselves are actually the church. So,
Right. I'm glad you said that. So like that is kind of where I'm at now. And I, you know, like we landed at Arcadia City, and like I said, it was like very comfortable. And one of the things that like anchored me there because I'm like so like I hate that I'm such a snob, but I am, and like I'm kind of just like resigned to that. Like I'm just like I'm sorry, but I'm just gonna be a snob. Like and
you mean what do you mean in
like
particular?
well I'm sorry. I think I said things that I didn't actually say. So I like the with the music specifically, like it's super important, you know? Like it's really difficult for me to sit through a lot of music in church. And that's the main reason for me to go, you know? And like
You mean that's the
Arcadia,
main reason? That's the main reason for you to go
it's
because
the
that's
main
how you
reason why I want to
initially.
go to church.
I know, but that's because you initially. That's how you connected with it in the first place. Is that what you mean?
I think initially connected with church in general, like through experiencing the presence of God during like the singing time, you
Yeah.
know?
My wife connects with it
Um,
in that way, but I do want to ask you on that. Like, if you read the Gospels, like Jesus and the disciples, there's not any music, which is kind of interesting.
oh yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's true that there was no music, but they don't mention it.
Yeah, there's a time where it says, and they sang a hymn and then went and ate or something like that. But
Yeah. Oh
but
no.
to
I'm
make
with
it,
you. I'm not saying that it's the most important thing, like in general. I'm just like
I was wondering what you meant
like
because
I'm gonna
you did say that was how you connected with it in the
I,
first place.
well, yeah, no, for sure. And I think long term, like I said, like we didn't end up at Gateway because we were just like, this isn't like I love this place, but it's just not our place, you know?
Yeah,
And there's a lot of places that I feel about like that. There's like a plenty of churches in the valley that I'm like, that's great. I'm like super glad that you go there,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but so long term, like the community is everything, and I'm 100% on board with what you're saying there. But like it's so hopefully this isn't too convoluted because I'm like juggling like a few different thoughts now. But like yeah, I don't know. Like if you're going somewhere for the first time, like for me, it's like I immediately like I'm like I gotta go outside during the music. I'm like it's like and
Yeah.
at Arcadia City, some of this is just my own like crappiness that like I'm not necessarily proud of, but like because like just I think at that point any production I would have just it wouldn't I wouldn't have judged it in a right way. I would just be like, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And Arcadia like had this dude Cody Bracy and Julia degrassi doing the music, and it was like just it like was just perfect, you know and I love them. Like they're awesome people, and I think primarily like what I'm interested in is like I like I'm like seeing their heart, and like that's what's attractive. But especially Julia is like super super crazy talented, and it was like just an acoustic guitar and a vocal and like no frills, no lights, just like a small intimate setting. And like I mean they could have like unplugged, they could have been she's playing violin and singing harmonies, he's just like leading and playing acoustic. So like the conditions were right, and then they were just super good. So honestly, like that's what kept me going. And it was really laid back and chill, and I still love them. I think like I don't know, like I don't know if they think of us as like being a part of that church anymore. Like I still do a men's Bible study group thing
Hmm.
there, but we haven't been to service since COVID popped off. And the reason why is that like the they like it was a night service. So the job that I'm doing with massage, I'm working Sundays. And like we started going around on the same time, and all they did was Sunday nights. So it was like, oh great, like this I don't have to change my schedule. We'll just go
Yeah.
Sunday night, and I work Sunday morning, and it was good for a few years. COVID hit, they stopped doing service for a few months. When they started back up, they were doing Sunday morning only, and it was kind of like, oh, maybe we'll start the night service up. And now it's like they're just not starting it up, and I was kind of holding off. And I don't know, man, at this point I'm just kind of like I don't know if I even really want to go to church. But one thing that I'm leaving out of that story is Cody and his wife had a baby. They moved back to Florida because that's where they're from, to be with family, and like God bless them for that. But they had a process of like looking for a new leader and found this guy, and it was kind of like a career guy. And like I mean I don't want to bash the guy, like I really don't have anything bad to say about him, like, but I mean the talent was definitely not there, like by a fraction. I mean I'm sorry, but it was like if that was happening when I first showed up, I don't think it would have kept me there. And again, I apologize for being a snob, but that's just the truth.
Well,
And
so another word you used was like, I think you said muddy, spiritually muddy or something right now. Like, do you just mean all this like about church and Is there
Yeah,
any
I've sort of
spiritual like?
landed because we're like 3 months out from the pandemic, right? And I'm kind of just like, don't, I feel like I've just been through like so many churches, and what I know church is, the kingdom of God, is merely, in my opinion, it's nothing more than the makeup of those who profess Christ, and the connection that they have, that,
Mhm.
that we have, you know, and these buildings, these institutions, I don't, like I said, like I will affirm like a ton of them, you know. I'm glad that they exist. Um, but I think even a lot of them that I'm like, I'm glad they exist. I'm like, there's this, there's this like idea that like this building and this Sunday thing is like church, and it's sort of this facade of the real thing, you know.
Yeah.
And we say like, you know, I mean, it's like almost a cliche thing to say, you know, it's like we all know this and say this, but it doesn't, like the shift is not really made in our minds, you know. And
Well,
yeah, like,
here's the way I see it. It's like I have family and friends at all these big churches, and I was always a part of them as well. And I actually was a part of going out and starting something. It didn't end up becoming a big church, but I had started a college ministry at one church, and I had been doing 16 years of full-time ministry. The way I see it is like all the people in these churches are not doing this because they made it up. It's just what they know. So the church got
yeah,
this way over like what, 50 years. It became like this mega church phenomenon and high production. 50 years ago, our grandparents were sitting in, if they were in churches, they were sitting in pews with like a cappella choir and no band and no lights and no fog machines and no nothing. Just super raw, just a sermon and some songs. That's how church was for about 2,000 years. So it's a very new phenomenon in the last 50 to 100 years that it got like this. And I think the people lost touch with like what the church is, and they started to think it's this package of things. And really they lost touch with the fact that that package of things was a new invention. Wasn't even there for nearly 2,000 years. So it can't be the main thing. It has to be add-on. Those are just add-ons, you know. It's like when you're
yeah,
paying for a prescription. I mean, if you're paying a subscription of something and you can have the beginner package or the essentials, or you can have the add-ons on top of that. All the things that we call church now are like add-ons. And it's like the essential is the
yeah,
people gathering in the name of Christ, taking communion, loving their neighbors, loving God, worshiping together, praying together, serving people together. So that's the church. All this other
yeah,
stuff is like literally
yeah,
add-ons that are not essential. They're not bad. They don't have to be bad. They don't have to be wrong, but they're definitely not the essentials. And that's the problem, that the church was became programmed to think those are all the essentials. That's
yeah,
my opinion. That's my opinion about where we're at as
yeah,
in church culture. And so even music. I mean, I have friends that are way into the music, and it's like it's not essential. It's a blessing and it's a luxury, but it's
yeah,
not the essentials. So I love good worship music. I'm like you too. My wife is too. Like if worship leader makes us cry and connect with God on a deep level where we feel enough that makes emotions make us cry, it's very powerful. And I completely have a lot of those experiences in my past, and I love those experiences, and I still desire that to happen, you know. But
yeah,
I was at a charismatic church for a while, and we sought that experience every week. That became the add-on that we were obsessed with. And but
mm,
it wasn't an essential, but it was what we seeked the most, you know.
yeah, yeah,
So I think anything that replaces God and um his people as like the essentials is basically we're veering into like add-ons, making the add-ons the main thing.
yeah,
So those are
yeah. I think any sort of program, like sometimes like even like the ministry, like the evangelisms, like I think can even be an add-on, you know?
The way we talk about it and program it. Yeah.
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 Um, so yeah, I'm like, I'm still like confused to some degree, you know, obviously about like, I don't feel like I'd have all the answers, but um, I'm just kind of like, I like, I see it, I think similar to you. And I still, I'm like, okay, given our culture, the way it is, you know, like I, I see its purpose as being like sort of just casting a wide net, you know,
Hmm.
and just a thing you could like bring a friend to and just be like, come on, like the band's like pretty good. Come and just like it's you know, it's pretty fun, and maybe they'll hear the word of God, you know, and the message and latch on, you know, and I like that. Um,
Yeah.
but that's not that's not it, you know.
Yeah.
It's not the full picture of like the real thing. And I mean, part of our story with the apprenticeship to Jesus thing is that, you know, trying to do authentic community is like really challenging because, you know, we're in this modern Western American culture, you know,
Hmm.
and do like really like trying to live like the church in Acts is like almost impossible here. I mean, I don't mean to be like fatalistic, but you know, it's really difficult, you know. Our society isn't really set up for that, you know.
Do you just mean other
And it's
people
like
do you just mean other people aren't gonna see it that way? That's why it's impossible?
that, but also just the fact that it's like we don't, it's like when we look at the church in Acts, you know, it's like they go to temple daily, you know what I mean? Because like their society was like set up like that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like we don't even like, it's just a completely different thing that we're in here, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
So
for
it's like,
sure.
what are we going to completely like turn society itself upside down and like traditions, you know? Um, but it was hard. There was always like a breakthrough moment with people, like when they would come into the house. Because at one point we were living with, just to fill you in on like what apprenticeship to Jesus is a little bit more. Like we opened up our house with some friends who were like sharing this vision of, you know, living a little more simply, sharing the things that we have, you know. It was one couple in particular who were like, well, like we neither of us had kids yet. We're like, we can be in the same house. Like, why would we both have a 3-bedroom home and like sets of furniture and like be working, you know, 40 hours a week, you know what I mean, to maintain this stuff when we could just be living more simply and like uh, enjoying like things in life and like devoting more of our time to be able to like do, you know, like have like witnessing and devotion time and stuff like that. So that's like what we were doing in apprenticeship to Jesus. It started out like just in our little house and inviting friends to come live with us, and then we connected with other homes that were doing the same thing, you know.
Yeah.
And that, like, that's what became apprenticeship. And um there's always this like breakthrough period where like about a month or so after somebody moves in, where they're just like, you know, they don't want to be accountable to like do certain things or to show up or what, like sometimes it's so internal you don't even know why they're like lashing out, you know. But there will be like a lashing out time. There'll be like, this sucks, like I'm gonna, and you talk it out and you get through it and you like work through those emotions, and then like that's when like really cool stuff starts to happen, you know. But I mean, to even find the people who are like willing to do that, well, one, it require like the likelihood that they're going to have a whole family is like, you know, they have to be the people to kind of open up their home, right? It's not like you're not going to have like two families of four coming together typically. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's not likely, right? So it's going to be younger people, it's going to be single people, right? So it's like, it's a very narrow kind of niche thing for of this population. Now you're eliminating, you know, a big percentage of the population, right, who are going to do this. And then of those people, it's like, man, it's like, that doesn't sound, you might be able to like have a discussion and just get somebody to think like, oh, that's really cool. But like, where does the rubber meet the road, you know? So anyway, that's, sorry if that's a long tangent, but just all that to say, like, it's hard to have like depth and authentic community in where we're at, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth fighting for, but we're at a point where it's like, really, once we had kids, it was like so much of our like church life was like revolved around doing like a lot of youth culture stuff and being like very present. And then it's like, once we had kids, for better or worse, it was like, kind of, some of this is like not any judgment on the church at all, but it's just like, I can't do all this stuff. I've got a kid, and then it's just all about the kid and the
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
and the family and the home. And so it's like, that's where I'm at, being, you know, a 41 year old with adult stuff. I'm also like, you know, arrested development, and like, I think a lot of us in our culture are. And I almost feel like adulting is like I'm just getting up to speed with that, you know.
At 41.
And I'm
Yeah.
much more comfortable in my skin now, whereas like, I remember having somewhat of an identity crisis around 30, having a
Yeah.
baby for the first time, and just being like, you know, having to lay down like BMX, which we didn't even get to talk about, but like, that was like a huge part of my life and ministry. And it's like I said, like, there's so much of this like youth culture stuff that like, as you transition into being like an old man, like some of that's just like, you're not going to be like cool anymore.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So you have to shed some of that, but then just responsibilities and all of that. So yeah, anyway, sorry for rambling.
Well, no problem. So we are out of time. But I do want to tell everyone, what if you want to be found, do you want to be found? Do you want to give any
Sure.
handles or music references? We didn't even get to all your
Yeah,
music projects.
I actually am wearing, I'm
Yeah, there we go.
wearing, this is the
Lords.
Lord's. The Lord's is kind of the primary thing that I've been pouring into for the last couple years for
Is
music.
it on Spotify?
So yeah, it's like everywhere.
Okay. The Lords.
So you could search the Lord's, you'll see my face and Preston. Um, we haven't officially announced it yet, but we added Chris recently. Um, so yeah, you could, the Lords. If you search it, you know, you'll find a lot of different stuff, because like, you know, we're not like, and that's why I can wear my shirt. My friend told me, it was like, you can't wear your own shirt, like that's lame. And I'm like, nobody knows who we are, so it's all good.
Yeah. That'd be like if I wore my
But
shirt. So
if
is it got Better Listen Up
you
and Weekend into it?
yeah, that's the first one. If
Okay,
you're
found
having
it.
trouble finding it, if you search Speakeasy,
Speakeasy and Lord's album.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And then
Yeah.
do you want him to follow you on Instagram or anything, or do you not care?
Sure. You follow me on Instagram if you want.
It's our whole like 12
A Chinese white man.
listeners. Chinese white
I
man.
know. Yeah, dude.
No, it's actually closer to
Yeah.
50, so we got about 50 listening probably.
Yeah. Find me on it's that's actually, like I'm if somebody wants to chop it up about whatever, dad stuff or music stuff or anything really, church stuff, I'm I'm I think most accessible on Instagram.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Richard. It's been a great time, and I really like hearing all your thoughts from the last 20 years. All the things that have been ricocheting around in your head
we we
while you're
should do
driving
a
the UPS truck and
yeah.
massaging people.
It's a stark contrast. We should do a I don't know if I'd be a great guy to do it, but we should do the Travis interview
Oh yeah.
where you get asked the questions because there's stuff I want to hear about.
Well, cool. Somebody will have to initiate that. But cool, man. Well, thank you so much for being on here. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to hanging out.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Alrighty, man. Bye.